Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Futurist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hey, look, I forgot to mention yesterday. You know, we're sort of kind of coming down the end of our study of the resurrection, and what I've contemplated doing is spending several videos. Don't know how many, don't know how long I want to do it. But I thought that I would dedicate perhaps 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even possibly a month. It all depends upon you, right? But I thought I would dedicate several videos to answering your questions. Now, what that means is, if you've got some biblical questions, specifically dealing with eschatology preferably, but hey, but if you've got some specific questions that you would like for me to address on my upcoming morning musings, now it'll be a while, all right? We're not done with the resurrection. But contact me, send me an email, send me a YouTube message asking the question that you would like asked. Now, don't go off the reservation here on me, all right? But if you have a good, serious, solid biblical question that you would like for me to address, then send it to me. I don't know which questions that I will address, don't know how many I will address, but I thought it'd be a little bit different for me to spend some time on videos just strictly answering your questions. Tell me what you think about that idea. I'll give it some thought. I'll contemplate about it. Look, I've already got several suggestions of what many of you have asked for me to cover as far as theme, topic, and subject is concerned. I've been asked to do a study of Matthew 24 and 25. Well, guess what? That would take a while. And so before I get involved in another very lengthy exegetical and expository study of a given book, then I thought I'd give you the opportunity to have your input, ask your questions. So again, send me your questions. No guarantees, but I'll try. All right. Well, I've been sharing with you the direct connection between the Great Tribulation and the resurrection. I have documented from Scripture that there is a direct, unbreakable, absolutely inseparable bond, temporally speaking, between the Great Tribulation and the resurrection. That bond, that relationship is established in Jewish writings. Scholarship recognizes that bond and that connection. Now, I got to tell you, it's one of those connections, however, that many commentators, they evidently don't see the train coming. And that is particularly true of both the amillennial and the postmillennial world. Here's what's amazing. In both the amillennial world and in the postmillennial world, i.e. the dominionist world, it is freely admitted that the Great Tribulation happened in the first century. Not only are we told by these amillennial and postmillennial commentators that the Great Tribulation occurred in the first century, but we are told there will not be another Great Tribulation. Okay, so the Great Tribulation occurred in the first century, but the Great Tribulation is inseparably bound up to, temporally linked to, the resurrection. Therefore, the resurrection must have occurred in the first century. That is, unless you want to engage in the gap theory. And you know, I'm seeing that more and more. In argumentum ad desperatum, some former preterists are saying, well, yeah, yes, this happened in the first century, but we're still waiting for this, even though scripturally those events are joined. And so, just like the dispensationalists insert gaps of thousands of years, for instance, between the 69th and the 70th week of Daniel chapter 9, these former preterists are now saying, well, okay, you have certain events that were for the first century, but the other events, the other eschatological events, they're for the end of time. Or these events begin to happen in the first century, they're even still ongoing. No, folks, I'm sorry, just doesn't work. But I could go on and on about that. Let me chronicle for you from some leading postmillennial and amillennial sources the belief that the Great Tribulation occurred in the first century. Now, Reformed amillennialist James Jordan, great guy. I had a formal public debate with him in Florida some years back. DVDs of that debate are available from me. But James Jordan wrote this, quote, "It is perverse," that's his word, "it is perverse for commentators to continue to insist that the Great Tribulation is still in the future," unquote. Keith Matheson says, "There is no end-time tribulation. Jesus' prophecy about tribulation in Matthew 24 was fulfilled between AD 30 and AD 70, unquote. Kenneth Gentry wrote, quote, "Copious, clear, and compelling evidence demonstrates that the Great Tribulation occurs in the first century." Gary DeMar, friend of mine, rejects a futurist application of the Great Tribulation. Gary DeMar even wrote in his book, End Times, or Last Days Madness, page 109, quote, "No generation of Jews living in Israel will ever experience a punishment as severe as the one that happened to the unbelieving Jews at the hands of the Romans, because their crime could never be as great. There have been wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes in various places, but a tribulation of this magnitude has never and will never come on the world again, because Jesus can never be rejected and crucified again," unquote. And again, that's page 109 of Last Days Madness. Folks, do you catch the power of this? The resurrection would come at the climax of the Great Tribulation. That's the biblical doctrine. That is Isaiah 26 and 27. That is Daniel 12, 1 and 2. That is Jeremiah 31, 5 and following. That is Hosea 13, 13 and 14. That is Micah 4 and 5. And other texts that we could give. The Great Tribulation would lead directly to the resurrection. But the Great Tribulation occurred in the first century. James Jordan, Gary DeMar, Keith Mason, Kenneth Gentry, and oh, by the way, Joel McDermott. Therefore, the resurrection occurred in the first century at the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. I'm sorry, folks, you simply cannot admit, you cannot teach and admit that the Great Tribulation occurred in the first century without thereby admitting that the resurrection occurred in the first century. Unless you can prove categorically that there's no relationship, that there's no temporal connection between the Great Tribulation and the resurrection, and you can't prove that. But unless you can, then that means that since Jesus said the Great Tribulation would be in the first century, He said His coming in judgment would be in the first century. He said the gathering of the elect at the sounding of the great trumpet, which is the resurrection of Isaiah 26 and 27, would be in that generation. And what that means is, when Paul in Romans chapter 8 spoke, and he said, "The whole creation groans in labor pains until now," but they were looking for the redemption, the day of redemption, the day of the resurrection. And it was about to take place. It was coming soon. when we view Romans 8 through the prism of Matthew 24, which is the right way to view it, it proves beyond any shadow of a doubt the resurrection was in AD 70. And we've got more. So we will see you on the flip side. In the meantime, if you want a discussion of all of this and more, go to my website, order the book, The Resurrection of Daniel 12:2, Fulfilled or Future. I want to tell you what, folks, you're going to be blown absolutely away by how clear and by how powerful the evidence is that the resurrection was in AD 70. We'll see you on the flip side.